Hello and welcome to this episode of our podcast on trust and privacy. I'm Ashok Hariharan, I'm the CEO of IDfy, and I'm thrilled to have you guys around for this. This series will explore the topic of trust and privacy in an increasingly digital world. And today we have with us Mr. Vinayak Godse, CEO of Data Security Council of India. And Vinayak sir has about 27 years of experience in information security, IT transformation, digital networking and telecom infrastructure. Vinayak ji also oversees the National Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity, Technology and Entrepreneurship, a joint initiative of DSCI and the Ministry of Electronics and IT. He has been deeply engaged in initiatives of DSCI with the government stakeholders and sectoral regulators, along with developing and delivering various privacy security frameworks and courses for practitioners. Prior to DSCI, he worked with global consulting practice of TCS in information risk management. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, Ashok.
And about a couple of months back, we met, and I think we vibed on the telecom part of it. I come from a little bit of a telecom background, and also, obviously, now a little bit on now doing a lot of work on privacy. And we talked about this there as well. Like for me, privacy, I kind of realized the importance of that about 4 or 5 years ago when all my data like practically is leaked on the net. So I get like so many SMSs a day, about 20, 30 SMSs where they don't have the permission to message me. And I get about 50 calls a day because I posted something on an e-commerce site for a rental home, right? Ever since I've been bombarded by people who should not have my data. And when we discuss, I just want you to reflect on that and what drove you towards this world of privacy and what.
Yeah, so I have a background working in telecom, right? And telecom, internet, and cyber becomes synonymous at point in time where we all started our journey in cybersecurity, right? And cybersecurity definitely attracted me, and that's why I left my government job in telecom and joined TCS in the consulting practices, right? And we always talked about information security, but sometime that time we used to talk about information security management system for that matter, and eventually by 2013, cybersecurity the world started coming in picture, right? Where implication of security on a larger, bigger scale as got government worried, and they started putting a lot of those external pressure and driver and obligation, and that's why information security was replaced by cybersecurity. During the same time, I think this DPDP Act, directives, not Act, of 1995 of the European Union, right? That time, it has put some obligations on companies which are collecting personal information. European Union has a history of seeing exchanges which involve personal data from the fundamental rights perspective, right? And that DPDP Act also put a condition of a adequacy assessment for the nations who would like to do business with European Union, which has a personal information involved in basically, right? And that's why as a DSCI's role as an industry body for data protection and cyber security, we got engaged with the European Union in a both track 2 plus formal engagement through Government of India to see what challenges we face in the European market. So initially it was mostly to help IT or BPO companies, but as Aadhaar come into picture, our concerns for privacy, I'm not saying Aadhaar is a concern, but because of Aadhaar digitization got exploded in India basically, right? And people started worried about their personal right associated data getting a little bit challenged, and that's why we see last 10 years of time people are in India, the concerns of privacy is aggravated, and that's led to this DPDP Act got passed by the Parliament and accepted by the President of India last year. And in entire this journey of this evolution, so Data Security Council of India, as name itself is data security, we got involved in policy making side on one hand, and on the other side we work with a lot of this user industry from banking, from telecom, from manufacturing to health sector. So which got quite a good exposure for us to understand how data and data security and especially data privacy play in different industry environment. On the other hand, what are different concerns and policy matters that do come into the picture, and that's why we started engaging with government. Since beginning it was like they were structured to engage on a data security privacy matter, and that's made me to come to the data privacy domain and area.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the evolution, right? If for the longest time, we kept thinking about how data can be used for giving better services, better product, and eventually this adage started, data is the new oil.
Yeah.
And data as a new oil without permission of of the user seems a little odd. But what do you think happens in a world which now changes with the DPDP Act? How should people how should enterprises look at data? And
so we know that when we talk about digital economy of $1 trillion, and in next 20 years it will probably become $8 to $10 trillion, almost 25 to 30% of the overall digital overall economy that we will be probably hitting in next 25 years time, right? And data is central to or digitization is central to that, right? And data is central to digitization. Basically, every product services that we are building is now data enriched or data centered. We are going increasingly to engage and area where every plan, every new idea, every new experience we are creating or productivity that we are improving, basically, we are seeing that data plays very important role there, basically, right? And while we trying to improve our consumer experience, improve our productivity, we also want to create new possibility. And this possibility is also enabled by data, and that's why people say data is a new oil, because it extract, or if you extract data, you work on data, it creates new value for you, basically, right? But when we do that, this is a little different in security, right? Because in security you are protecting your own asset, your own data, your own information. In privacy, the rights of the individual of which you have collected data is at stake here, basically, right? And that's why you are protecting something which is not a part of your organization. It's not your asset, basically, right? And that's why privacy becomes an important, and that's why you need a kind of regime where you allow people to do digitization, you allow people to do innovation with the data, but while doing that, you make them responsible, accountable for that, right? Okay. So that they do responsibly, they do with a sense of accountability. And most of the regulations for privacy, including our DPDP Act, brings that responsibility, accountability. And when you talk about regulation, they always define obligations for you. And those obligations and liability will bring those responsibility and accountability towards the data. And in digital economy that we talk about, and data is oil, that can be responsibly happen only if there is obligations and liability associated with that. And that's the role that DPDP Act plays.
No, that's an interesting thought, right? Because if you think about data, like there's two parts of data, right? One is data that the user is giving permission for, and then there is data that we acquire through platforms, through DMP platforms or data brokers in some sense. How are those business models, do you think, are going to evolve? Because these brokers have not got permission from me to share that data, right?
So that's the challenge, right? So after the enforcement happens of this DPDP Act, right, then every data collection action has to be legalized, and the law has stated a condition for legality of the collection and processing data, right? And it has brought that every data you are collecting, there should be some specific purpose that should be associated with that, right? And you should collect data only for the purpose and specific purpose, basically, right? So means there is a accountability and obligations and liability that will be set up on you when you are collecting data to define the purpose. That's one important part. Second important part is when you are collecting it, you should use it for the intended purpose only. That's another obligation, basically, right? And the law has made it very clear, if you don't do a particular way of collection and processing, that processing itself is legal. So now legality associated with data collection and use is clearly defined in the law, basically. If somebody is using a way of collection and usage of the data not conforming to these expectations of the law and obligation, then that itself is illegal in nature. And then this also is good because those organizations which are doing legitimate business, so they can establish a legal background and backing of the collection processing that they are doing, basically. So there is a clear distinction between the two type of organization. Those who are doing procedurally better, legally better, so their processing will be legitimate as legal, and those who are not, they will be illegal in nature, basically. So this distinction itself will deter a lot of organization not to indulge into activity that will lead them to a problem of working in an illegal or legitimate zone, basically.
So I hope, like with this, the thing for me when that act came out was that, oh, finally maybe I won't be as harassed as as
Yeah,
before.
I mean, how much this maybe it's remained to be seen given this
How
enforce.
do you enforce?
How does this impact the end citizen? This
Yeah.
remains to be seen now.
Yeah.
And we hope to see with this accountability will definitely make life better for the end citizen.
So like I remember 4, I mean maybe 8, 9 years back, we had that DND, but most of the platforms didn't look it up and try. So enforcement is key, isn't it, for something like this? And I think it's hopefully the government is, and I'm hearing that with the new regulator that's coming for this, it looks like this is going to be taken a lot more seriously than the DND world.
I think there is certainly, so when we talk about privacy, we always talk about two things. One is the expectations which express in the content part of the privacy, and there is another part is the procedural enforcement that privacy expect you to that.
Correct.
So the law talks about both of things, and it will create a kind of a regulatory environment to make people accountable for it, and if there is an issue and problem that you can raise a grievances against this data protection board, which can take actions on the organizations, and there is significant liability this law puts together, right? It's almost 200 crore plus, and in some cases it will go much beyond that. So in that case, I think there is a outcome liability and procedural liability as well. If something goes wrong, there is a significant liability. It's not only that, your way of doing it also defined in the law, and if you not conforming to that, it will be called as a illegal, illegitimate in one hand, and secondly there will be liability on that as well.
So just stepping back, you had mentioned that when you started this journey, you actually looked at the European GDPR world and how Indian companies could comply with those norms for our largely our services side of the business, right? How do you, now that since you have kind of had both views of how GDPR works and DPDP, what are the differences do you see, like a marked difference between these two worlds?
See, the GDPR is a one law for various different things. It's a European Union law, and some areas it has been very nuanced obligations and requirements and expectations it is talking about, and it did contribute a lot in terms of improving the practices of collection and processing information, and it also, in a way, if you look at the contribution GDPR has, it's a raise the bar of standards of collecting and processing information, right? It's not only European Union, but those organizations which are willing to do business with GDPR, they also improve the practices of collection and processing information. So that way it has played a very important role, and also it has set up a standard, gold standard for data protection basically. Having said that, there are some areas where it's still kind of a very nuanced, very detailed and stringent requirement and obligation at a law level, and sometimes it may bring rigidity to the table basically, right? Whereas when we devise our law, we talked about it is a principle rule based law. So there is a high level principle the law talks about, and there is a rule which you can change with the time. So that you can make the data protection legislation more contextual, more relevant to the world that you are getting into basically, right? So this is one of the key difference here. Yes, enforcement is very strong in GDPR. We are still figuring out, probably maturing as a geography or economy or society in terms of how do you enforce better for this. Probably this is a start for that, but eventually we will get those enforcement element as well in the coming future time, or some other law may also come into the place for the enforcement part.
So one of the things I had when I was reading the GDPR world and DPDP, one of the key differences is, I think the fiduciary gets fined and not the processor, right? So the burden of compliance is on the fiduciary a lot more than GDPR world. So one of the things that I was thinking about is, what are, as we use processors as fiduciaries, this is going to have a lot more plumbing required in the systems than.
The entire transaction processing business, be it a economic transaction or financial transaction I am talking about, right. So, the supply chain of that has unbundled a lot,
Yeah.
right. Every sector, including financial sector, talks about fintech, lot of third party ecosystem, lot of interfaces, nowadays AI capability, cloud capability, and microservices architecture you talk about. So, right from onboarding customer to initiating transaction to enriching it, executing it, and also managing data out of it, the n number of players do come into the picture, right. And in that, I think those who are defining purpose and means becomes a prime responsible for obligations to privacy, right. And that's our law, right.
Yeah.
In the process, we could have thought about in European Union put some obligations and liability on processor, but sometimes it creates a duplication of the legal liability on the processor as well, actually. So, at this point in time, we had taken a very cautious kind of a, approach here, where India being the economy which is serving global geography, not to create too much duplicate, too much extra burden on a processor ecosystem. But yes, if there's a significant liability which is imposed on a data controller, fiduciary for that matter, they will eventually pass that to processor. And through that, then you can make processor responsible.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it was actually a better way to do it, because the burden of auditing and making sure your processors are doing the job properly, if you don't put it on the fiduciary, they'll be like, oh, okay, it's okay. He did the mistake, so fine him, right? So the audit responsibility and the responsibility of keeping that customer's data is still technically should sit with fiduciary. So I kind of thought that when I read it, I was like a little pleasantly sort of surprised that India did it.
There are some areas of concern there, but largely this model, even GDPR also works on it, but there are only few areas GDPR has really made it a kind of obligations on, legal obligations on processor.
Correct.
But barring that, I think this is an idea across globe that people see fiduciary or controller is primary owner of a privacy.
Correct.
And through contractual means or other means that flows to other processor system.
The other, the one I was thinking about is how do we, one other piece which kind of excited me with specifically with the DPDP bill is children's data, and how we are serious about it, because it's not called out very clearly that parental consent is required, and children data you cannot, in India you cannot even analyze it, which is great, because I think there in the European world you just have to click a tick mark saying that I'm over 18 and you're done. Here, the burden of proof again sits with the fiduciary. So I thought that was a interesting.
The verifiability of a parental consent is definitely important intervention, because in society we need to give extra protection to those population demographic group which likely to get or the harm, or for that matter the loss will be quite significant, right?
Correct.
And basic idea of this verifiability and consent reflects that seriousness. Although implementation, it will be
tough,
not easy. It's a tough in terms of getting consent, verifiable consent from the parent. But yes, country has taken that stand that this is the area probably non-negotiable as a society, Indian society.
Yeah. Now, taking a step back from this, one of the things I noticed also, which I think is the fact that India, for us, like the way we are thinking about it at least, is that for the common man, like which is the the remotest person who probably cannot even possibly read, there is provision for protection. Which I thought was very
Yeah, I mean, say one of the key things which it talks about, like, and that's the beauty of this law. The process you follow or expectation that you have for consent, for that matter, it should be easy, unambiguous, clear affirmative action. So these words are meant to make sure that the interaction between the companies who are collecting, processing information and with the consumer are very positive in nature. There is no hidden underlying agenda in terms of collecting that, and there is a active participation from the
End user.
citizen or consumer, and that's what the law is resorting to, and which is a best part of this law. And then it also talks about India is such a diverse country. You should give notice in different languages.
Correct.
So that's also a good thing, because otherwise it becomes very difficult, because we are taking digitization to the remotest and farthest parts of the country, and if they understand in their language,
Correct.
so they will be better informed with respect to data that has been collected about them.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I personally, when I was, and we've been reading the GDPR world as well, when the Shri Krishna report came in initially, one of the things that they had talked about is why did they call it data principal and not data subject?
Yeah.
Because data subject says that is almost subject to to the fiduciary, but we are calling it as the data.
Term-wise, we definitely brought quite interesting thing. We are not saying controller, we are saying fiduciary.
Correct.
We are saying data, not data subject but data principal. In that sense, these are quite a good, this gives quite a good, even it attributes quite a good value, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then we also, entire law, then we talk about, we also refer that data principal as a she.
Yeah.
So there's a diversity angle as well here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so I was like that was what endeared me towards the law a little more, because it wasn't about punishing or taking away. It's actually about ownership and not ownership. It's about responsibility.
Responsibility. So we are asking organization to be more responsible, take ownership, and entire law is also made such as it will handhold the organization to become more responsible and accountable.
Do you think like as fiduciaries they should wait or just get started?
No, we are advising most of our members start your journey, because privacy implementation is very different than security.
Correct.
It's overhauling lot of designs you have, the process that you set up, the relations that you are, business relations that you evolve until now, way you engage, interact with end user basically, right, and the grievances that you address. So it will be suddenly a lot of those obligation liability you will be sitting on, right? So we are advising most of our members and organizations that you start taking those initial critical first step, so that law would give some time, but it will not give that much time, right? So that you are better prepared to implement it once the law is enforced, right?
So I mean, we work in this space. So when we are talking to our customers, a lot of them are starting to think about data discovery as the first problem to solve. But at least for the law is very clear that you solve for flow first, because at least don't let the past karma, at least in the future you don't have to worry about it, right? So what is your like in a way of as DSCI as well as being in the industry for so long, what would be your like 4 or 5 steps to start with? I mean,
so what we are, and as you rightly said, what we are advising people to have a good visibility, right? Try to know where exactly data is sitting, how their data is interacting and engaging with other business units and services and capabilities that you are building basically, right? Then gradually start bringing structure with this data discovery, look at how data is flowing basically, and from that you can build data discovery, then classification. So this could be initial first primary hygiene that you set up, right? Then you start looking at, because this law defines processing in 18 different kind of verbs basically, right? And it will probably make you to, and there's also this specific purpose for processing is also there, right? So then for each of the data use and processing that you have, create a good record out of it. So that's what we talk about ROPA for that matter, right? The records of processing, right? Second is have a good monitoring on the actions which are happening on data, right? That's the second thing. And then the data access governance is another important part. Eventually people are now going like observe what is happening with the data. And these are still a very technical, and then you can also go for anonymization. If you are sharing data, you try to implement encryption to protect data. And there are some administrative things as well, like you have better notice management system, a better concern management system, data governance mechanism for that matter. So some of the early steps that organizations should start taking it, and eventually start implementing some of the capabilities, sometimes technical capability, because why technical technology is important, because volume and velocity and complexity of data you are collecting is rising day by day, and you are not able to do that humanly, right, with human efforts basically. That's why start looking at or preparing for at least implementing some of the technology.
So one of, at least internally, what we have been thinking about is, so there is the data discovery element, which is, I think, is a journey.
Yeah.
It's never going to end.
Yeah.
It is going to keep continuing. So you can't say that data discovery will end and then we will do other things. So it's almost like a parallel process to run.
It's a parallel thread. You need to start. So discovery you start with, then classification you build together.
Correct.
Then you start monitoring the actions happening on data, and then you start building ROPA on top of it.
Correct.
Start connecting those ROPA to the purposes that you're connecting to. So these are all effort that should go probably in parallel.
So so we were thinking, okay, here's a data discovery journey, which might take, as more data comes in, you have to do it more. So first is discovery, then cleansing, then what is to be, right? So these three stages. Parallelly, actually probably because the rules will very clearly state that, okay, the future data should not be bad, like the stock and flow problem. So you say, okay, flow will fix immediately, because at least start giving proper notices and tagging your processors internally. And then you have a stock problem, which is, for a lot of banks, it could be hundreds of millions of people with maybe 10 or 15 journeys per person. How do you think that is going to, that's the last part of it.
Obligation with respect to legitimacy of the data that you already collected and you want to use it after the law getting enforced. So there is you need not have to take a consent for that, right? So, but you need to state the purpose of processing of that information. Means you need to give notice, and that's the thing. So the rules will define how that notice should be given, and it also talks about reasonability, right?
Correct.
Reasonable time. It's not pushing you should do in this much of month and this much of the days basically, right? So with issuing notice, you should be able to continue. You need not have to take another consent if the purpose is same. But if you are changing purpose, then certainly you go back to them and seek consent.
One of our fiduciaries are asking, oh my God, now I as a fiduciary, I have 4 or 5 purposes, and I used to cross sell because that's how I generate revenue. Now what will my marketing people do? Because nobody is going to give, will people give consent for cross sell, upsell?
But it's also opportunity, right? If you are doing something, if you take a proper consent, it legitimizes the collection and processing the information, right? In a way, it's also, there are a lot of gray area most of the organization must be, like, is it right or not? But the law gives you an opportunity to legitimize some of the things that you have been doing, right? If your customers are agreeing to be part of this type of processing, and if there's a process set up for this, then if you follow that process, then you legitimize the collection and processing of the information.
And one of the things I was thinking, and GDPR also kind of worked like that, is I don't think governments are unreasonable. At times, if there is a,
I think our DPDP Act has been a lot of practical
reasonability
has gone into that. Way it was and way it finally is, right? We are mindful of the digitization and role that the data play, not only individual organization, but at the economy level as well. Right? And that reality has factored in DPDP Act.
And I think it will also keep evolving as this thing. Now, last couple of questions. As a fiduciary, now this journey is going to be a long journey. There's going to be things you'll have to do for flow immediately. There's a parallel activity which is data discovery and mapping and classification, etc., that needs to be run. And then you have to solve the stock problem eventually. But there is also a life cycle problem there. What happens when a person comes and says delete? How do you train your people, because people are handling data? So one is, are fiduciaries recognizing it? And what would be your recommendations to fiduciaries to think about this as a program and not as a one-time activity?
Yeah, so this is so that's what it's different than a security, right? Security will do project, and privacy is a large part of privacy is procedural in nature.
Yeah.
And it has to be proven in every process.
Yeah.
Every actions of data collection processing, and it has to be proven to millions of processing you must be doing, right, basically. So only programmatic approach would take you there, basically, right? And recently we have been talking about PrivaOps, right? We until now talks about SecOps, right? But privacy operations would now emerge as an important thing, because procedural expectations are too many here, and they will add more and more expectations in future, right? So demonstrating to that expectation is a day-to-day job, right?
Yeah.
It has to be continuous effort that you should be putting together. One is to doing what you have been doing, and also improving to the new expectations which are coming in.
Do you think people are trained well enough for handling this? I know DSCI, your courses.
We have our courses, so we have almost 3 courses in privacy. One is to understand it as a DCPP, then auditor course, and then DPO also, right? But we believe there are other professional bodies also train people in this. Last 5-6 years, there are a lot of awareness. People are learning, people are educating themselves, and I don't think this geography has a problem with respect to providing those skills required for any new thing coming in. Basically, that's why that actually here India scores well, because that's why I see a lot of global companies are moving their privacy operations to India, right? They are looking privacy engineering work to India, right? So I don't think that's a big challenge for us, but yes, we need cautious effort to create those capability who can understand the nuances better.
I'm going to ask a little bit, maybe a little controversial questions, right? Not that controversial, but so privacy, data security, most fiduciaries only wake up when something wrong happens, right? Like when there's a data breach and some of it has happened, that's when the CEO gets to know about it, and then he goes and asks, what are we doing? And they're like, oh, we didn't invest in security at all. And then the budget gets created. This is a CEO problem now, isn't it?
Yeah, so not
it's a board problem.
Nowadays it's board problem.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it has come inherently. A lot of regulators are pushing boards to be more vigilant with respect to security and what is happening in privacy. So that way now, see, until now, privacy, for that matter, security was adding a lot of friction, right? And you need to get authorization, you need to do this and that. So it has been seen as a something which needs to be taken care of. But now in the coming age where data is central to what you do, and the concerns associated with data is rising quite significantly. We believe, and that's why we don't use. I'm cautiously now trying to do. It's not about lock, right? I hate to use lock as a imagery or icon or something for security privacy.
Correct.
We are not locking down systems. So we should use security and more importantly privacy as enabling business, right?
Correct.
And there are ways which are evolved, and there are capabilities and services and technologies somebody like IDfy is building, which can actually enable people to do more with capabilities that will take care of the issues and problem while allowing you to do what you want to do, basically, right? And that way, I believe if you talk in that manner, I believe businesses will commit more for the security and privacy.
Yeah, I think the word controls, I don't like that.
I also don't like
that word at all, right? Like it's actually, I think the responsibility should be the word to use rather than control.
It's a capability more. So control, by meaning, it also gives like one policing, right? And we don't need policing, we need enablement, we need the capabilities, basically. we need solutioning basically. We need a ways to address it basically, right? So somehow we need to look at some of the conceptions of security or privacy for that matter needs to be really revisited to give them legitimate kind of a role that they will be playing from now, right? So they will be actual enabler. For example, some of the cryptography can enable some of the transaction which you never thought could happen.
Exactly. With safety.
Yeah, I mean, who thought about the mobile phone would help you do transaction?
Exactly.
But some of the thing which came in mobile phone in 2013-14, which helps you to store message securely and pass that message securely.
Correct.
That's why mobile has enabled you to do transactions on mobile. Right?
So, you know what? So, in my opinion, if we don't think of this as a burden and think of it as an enablement of trust, the first companies, first fiduciaries who say that this is a trust problem and I need to build it as a way to make sure the data principals are trusting you better by having better security. I think that's
was it's an ideal situation for us as well. Like,
right?
It becomes a market differentiator.
Exactly.
Than a compliance burden actually.
Exactly. Any last words from you which you would like the audience to know, like how should they look at it?
Yeah, I mean, see, what we are looking for, one is the definitely education, awareness, understanding, preparing and responding to this better, right? But we, as a Data Security Council of India, as we work with various different industry sector and we also work with other side, right? So those who are building capabilities like IDfy, right? So we also see these areas of security privacy as an opportunity area as well. You can build better career in this area.
Yeah.
You can build better product and capability in this area. You can look at different use cases and problem statement because henceforth technology will be accelerating with AI coming and many other technologies coming in. A lot of new use cases will coming in. So they will throw a lot of interesting opportunities for us to work on basically, right? So we now equate security or privacy with possibilities, and I like to conclude with that. Like this is also area of possibilities for us.
On that note, sir, thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure being here.